Hi, it's Steve. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know about a couple of great opportunities at integrityandjoy.com. If you're like most people, your New Year's resolutions fade away by February, and that leaves you feeling kind of dejected, right? But you can set intentions this year and shift your mindsets and create new habits so that you can create meaningful, lasting change in your life. We've got a special introductory rate for new clients, a Jumpstart 2025 package of 4 mini sessions that will help you jumpstart your New Year's intention or new habit. We've got a 4-session discount with a huge savings and a special New Year's package that will get you the support you need and deserve to have a great year with a discount of over $500. So go to integrityandjoy.com for more information. Let's make 2025 a great year. Welcome to Integrity and Joy. I'm Steve Walker. This is episode 8 of Integrity and Joy, the importance of courage. In this episode, I'm going to be exploring the different ways in which we need to have courage in our lives and how we can foster more courage for ourselves and for our kids. So welcome to Integrity and Joy. I am Steve Walker, former U.S. diplomat, activist, educator, and now life coach, meditation teacher, and podcaster. So welcome. Hopefully this isn't your first time with us, but if it is, welcome. Glad you're checking us out. I hope you go back and listen to the earlier episodes and follow us here. And please leave a rating and a review. If you're a returning listener, thanks. Thanks for coming back. It means a lot, really. Anyways, today's episode is about courage and how important it is in our lives in so many ways. This is going to be a recurring theme, right? I'm going to be talking about courage in the podcast in future episodes, probably a lot. And it's interesting because I hadn't been thinking about it as a central theme, but I was having a conversation with Erica Lazarus, who is a former student of mine and also works with me here at Integrity and Joy on some of our social media stuff. And we were talking about themes for, the podcast, for social media posts, and courage came up. And I can't remember which one of us raised it first, but Erica had real insights and a real passion about the topic. And so it got me thinking more about it. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to sort of intro the topic today. And hopefully it'll be thought-provoking and maybe inspirational for you and maybe to get you to think a little bit differently about your own courage. And then we're going to have bonus episodes, right? We've had one bonus episode already, which was on my struggles with my inner voice, right? And that was inspired by an episode that I did on your inner voice, right? Managing your inner voice. And so with this one, I'm going to be having bonus episodes where I talk to people specifically about their own courage when it's been tested, how it's been so important in their lives, in the hopes that it will inspire other people to find their own courage in various aspects of their lives. And the first bonus episode is going to be a conversation that I had with Erica after our initial kind of brainstorming session where it came up. I said, hey, let's record a conversation about courage and just see what comes up and see how we want to use it. And I just thought it was great. I thought it was powerful, kind of philosophical at times. Erica shares a lot about, her own journey, particularly this year through healing, and how courage has played a role and how her understanding of courage has evolved. it's really, really powerful. So I hope you'll listen to that. And I'm going to have other guests in the coming weeks and months where we'll do bonus episodes that'll be just on courage. So, in addition to the usual weekly episodes, courage is going to be one of the ones that we keep coming back to a lot through bonus episodes. So I hope you'll check them out. So why is courage so darn important? Because I think a lot of times we tend to have a narrow definition of courage in our minds, and we tend to think of people, who are courageous as often being a relatively small group of people, right? It's like heroes, right? People who serve in the military, people who are, in the police or fire departments, people who we think like almost are on a pedestal. That courage and people who are courageous, sometimes we think of them as like almost different than us. And yet, being human requires a lot of courage of different types throughout our lives, and they're all important. I would argue they're all important in terms of living a good life and being able to deal with life's ups and downs and the challenges and the crises, and also just in terms of being the best version of our authentic selves. In order to have meaningful, authentic relationships, like that requires courage too. And Brene Brown has written and talked a lot about that. So I want us to think about like the various ways, or at least some of the various ways in which courage plays an important role in our lives, and how to think about it, and to what extent are we raising our kids to be courageous or not, right? And how we can be better at being courageous ourselves and inspiring others, including our kids, but inspiring others in general to be more courageous. And I think particularly when we look at our society, and there's so much anxiety amongst kids, right, and adults, and that is a manifestation of, I think in part, a lot of fear that is, kind of lurking in our society all around us, right? I think there's a lot of things that cause us and our kids anxiety, and I think part of what we may be seeing is that we haven't learned maybe well enough, and that our kids haven't learned well enough how to be courageous, and how to deal with fear, because we, tend to wrap our kids in a bubble, right? There's a lot of people who are, trying to be good parents and parent differently than our parents did, by being more hands-on, by being more protective, by, overscheduling our kids and, protecting them from consequences sometimes, right? And it can be with the best of intentions. But I think one of the consequences of that, kind of like helicopter parenting, and there's different versions of it that we could talk about. But I think part of what ends up happening is that kids don't develop the capacity and the confidence in themselves to be courageous, to confront their fears, to deal with situations that make them uncomfortable, right? And so they avoid their discomfort zone, and they avoid dealing with the things sometimes that make them afraid, or even sharing or talking about them, right? And as a result, I think it feeds into this broader phenomenon of anxiety, right? But courage is something that is a response to fear. It's a response to something that is causing us to be afraid. And I think there are lots of different types of fear in different situations that can make us uncomfortable or afraid. And the fear can be, obviously, some fear can be, real, tangible, physical fear. When I was posted in Mexico in my first tour in the Foreign Service, I had literal, life and death situations, bandits with machine guns trying to force me and my friends off the road on a road trip. That one literally was life and death, right? And tremendous in the moment physical fear. I was sent at one point to investigate rumors of death squads or a death squad in a Mexican prison. And sure enough, there were death squads in the Mexican prison, I found out. And that was one that, potentially my life could have been in danger because I was investigating this thing that eventually led to the downfall of the warden and the deputy warden and the governor, and right. So that was a situation. So those were ones where there was literally a physical safety fear. But there are other times where our fear is fear of judgment or fear of abandonment or, fear of loneliness. We self-sabotage sometimes, consciously or not, because we're afraid of failure. And so we kind of, again, subconsciously take control of the failure by self-sabotaging, and then we have an excuse as to why we failed rather than we did our best and still failed. So there are lots of different types. So let's start off talking about my favorite topic, integrity. And, integrity is all about living consistently, kind of in alignment with our values. And yet there are times frequently in our lives when those values are challenged by a given situation. It could be a moral dilemma. And that's a situation where we need to have the courage to stick to our values and to live consistently with our values, not to take the easy way out. And it may mean, doing something that's unpopular or is going to make some people upset or angry or disappointed with us. Where there may be negative consequences, but we've weighed the consequences and, we're willing to live with them because the consequences of not living in accordance with our values might be greater, right? So that's one way in which we really need to have courage, and that's something that I would argue gets tested a lot, right? I think that's in some ways one of the harder ones because it is so frequent that our integrity, is challenged in some way, shape, or form. Where it's tempting to take the shortcut because we're afraid that we might fail or embarrass ourselves if we don't finish the task or do it well enough. So we might take a shortcut that feels like it lacks integrity. But it's important to have the courage to say, look, I'm going to do my best and I'm going to do it with integrity, and all I can do is my best, right? And live with the consequences. Things that put you in your discomfort zone are going to trigger that fear of failure as well, right? Or rejection or judgment. And yet we know, it's a cliche, that life begins at the edge of your comfort zone, right? That living in your discomfort zone is actually really important, right? Not all the time, right? There's plenty of time that it's good to be in your comfort zone and know what soothes you and makes you feel safe. But we're not going to grow, right? We're going to stagnate and rot if we don't push ourselves into our discomfort zone, try new things, go into new situations, take chances, right, that might make us feel a little uncomfortable in order to grow, in order to have new powerful experiences, in order to learn, in order to meet new people, have the potential to have new important people come into our lives, right? Whether it's new friends or a new romantic partner. Your discomfort zone is absolutely going to make you feel a little afraid. And yet we need to have the courage to to go there, to live often in our discomfort zone. Adam Grant, who you may have listened to or watched on his podcast or social media or read his books, he's fantastic. And I remember, I think it was like a year ago, I think it was around this time, where he said that one of his goals for 2024 was to fail, I think he said at least 10% of the time. Because if he wasn't failing at least 10% of the time, then he wasn't pushing himself into his discomfort zone enough. He wasn't having enough courage to take risks. And I thought that was really powerful, right? I've thought about that one a lot. And I think that's a good way of thinking about it, that we have to be willing to be uncomfortable, to challenge ourselves, to risk failure, to take appropriate risks, often. And some of them aren't going to turn out the way we want them to, and that's okay, right? We can learn from those mistakes, those failures, those setbacks. So I thought that was a great example, right? And then change, right, which is related, right? If we are pushing ourselves into our discomfort zone, implicit in that is that we're probably seeking or welcoming into our lives some kind of change, right? And but change can be hard, right? A lot of people don't like change. We're programmed almost, in the more primitive parts of our brain to seek what's familiar, because particularly for our prehistoric version of ourselves, what was familiar was safe, right? The berries that we knew were safe, wouldn't kill us, right? The people that we knew were safe. They were people who probably weren't going to try and kill us or take our stuff, right? And so we like the familiar, right? And a lot of us resist change. We're afraid of change. But change is inevitable. Everything's changing all the time. And people are going to come in and out of our lives, right? And, situations at work are going to change, right? New bosses, old bosses, and new people to work with, new people to work for us. You get promoted or you get, a bad job review, whatever. Like, things change all the time. And we have to deal with those changing circumstances. And so recognizing that provokes some fear in us, and understanding that in the face of change, we have to have courage, right? To do our best and to not panic or to not resist it and, kind of work against the change, but rather, to the extent that we can, try to influence the change, right? Be a co-creator of our lives and experiences and try to shape the way the change is happening, but also to adapt to it when we have to and do our best. And do that with integrity, right? But to try and be the best version of ourselves going through that change, but try to be intentional about it, right? Mindful about it, and try to influence and shape that change as best we can, right? So that's going to require courage, right? If we go to fear tends to shut us down. Fear is paralyzing, right? Fear, triggers fight or flight, and neither of those is usually really good in these day-to-day regular life situations, right? That's a different thing than the physical danger circumstances, right? Fight or flight in those cases can save our lives, right? Depending on how we respond to those instincts. But in day-to-day stuff, we don't want to be in fight or flight. We want to soothe ourselves, calm our nervous system, get back to a place of calm and safety in terms of our nervous system so that we can think rationally, right? And weigh pros and cons and think about alternatives and channel our future selves and think about how we want to handle things now so that our future selves will be happy about it or proud about it. And so, fight or flight doesn't help us. The panic or the fear in the moment doesn't help us. And panic never really helps you. Even if you're in fight or flight, you don't want to go into panic mode because then everything just shuts down. That's a shutdown mode. But in the day-to-day, normal circumstances in which we need to be courageous in the face of fear, we don't want to be in fight or flight. And so, we need to have the courage to, again, embrace change often and shape it where we can and adapt to it when we have to and make the best of it and be our best selves. And often these times when our integrity and our capacity to push through fear with courage, these are the times that often define us, right? It's easy to be a good person and to live with integrity when things are going well. But when we're facing a moral dilemma, or we're in our discomfort zone, or when we're facing big changes, like those are the times that often are going to really define the extent to which we can be a person of integrity, be our authentic selves, treat others well, treat ourselves well. Like those are the times when these things get tested and actually reflect more about who we are and what's our capacity to live a good life, right? And be a good person. So those are like situations that come up, right, where we, you can kind of, I think, understand, wow, yeah, those require some courage, right? And those are different than physical danger situations, but yeah, I get it, right? Those require courage. But then there's also the courage of, relationships and the way that we interact with other people. And I would argue also the way we treat ourselves, right? Maybe the most important relationship. And that's where, the Brené Brown stuff comes in, because as she talks about, having high quality, authentic, meaningful relationships requires us to be our authentic selves, right? To be who we truly are, not to be playing a role or wearing a mask or being a people pleaser. And that requires vulnerability, right? We need to be vulnerable. We need to, understand and love ourselves, flaws and all, and be able to be our authentic selves with other people, so that the people who like and love us really like and love the real us, and we don't have to feel like we're playing a role all the time. And that vulnerability is required because not everybody's going to like us or love us, which is okay. We don't like or love everybody. So we shouldn't be thinking that everybody has to like or love us. But what that means is that we need to face the possibility of rejection and abandonment. And that's a big fear, right? That's a big fear that a lot of people have. I have a fear of abandonment, probably originally because of being adopted. And so I've had to face that fear of abandonment and try to be my best version of my authentic self, and face the fact that not everybody's going to like me or love me, but the people who do like and love me like and love the real me. And that's what I really want. So I have to face the fear of rejection, right, and abandonment, which has happened, right? I've been rejected countless times and abandoned by different people, emotionally or physically, right? And relationships end and people move on, right? And that's the cost, right? So you've got to have the courage to say, like, yeah, I'm willing to bear that fear, right? And, not avoid it, not suppress it. And that's a requirement kind of courage, is that there is fear to overcome. And it's not by suppressing it or avoiding it. It's by kind of taking it on, facing the thing that you're afraid of and being willing to deal with it and the consequences, right? And but knowing that's a better alternative than giving into the fear and avoiding, in this case, being vulnerable, right? Because if you avoid being vulnerable and to try to protect yourself from the abandonment or rejection, you're actually going to make sure that in the end you have a greater sense of isolation and loneliness, because you're going to lack authentic relationships. You might have a bunch of people who quote unquote like you, but they don't like the real you, and you know that deep down inside. And you're constantly trying to people please and play the role that you think you want them to play. And that's not going to feel good. It's not going to give you the satisfaction that you're looking for, the connection that you're looking for. So, that courage is to face it and say, like, yeah, I'm going to do the thing that's making me afraid, because the alternative is worse, right? But that takes courage, right, to go through it. The courage to, right now in our society, to be your authentic self, to live in accordance with your values, even though in a polarized society, there are people in your family or friends of yours or neighbors or whatever who you might end up, having conflicts with, or they may end up rejecting you or judging you or abandoning you because of your values, because things have become so polarized in our society. But we have to be people of integrity, right? We have to stand up for our values. It doesn't mean you're picking a fight all the time, and it doesn't mean you're trying to get in arguments with people, but you should not be pretending that you're not who you are and that you don't believe what you believe, or trying to placate other people who don't share your values. Like, you need to be your authentic self. And hopefully in the important relationships to you that family members say, or people that you work with, and you work with them, you got to work with them. Hopefully you can find a way to agree to disagree, or to certain subjects are kind of off limits, at least some of the time. But you shouldn't be pretending that you're someone that you're not. You shouldn't be abandoning your values just because you're afraid of the confrontation, or afraid of the difficult conversation, or afraid of, again, being rejected or abandoned. There's another way in which we need courage in a way that makes us vulnerable, and that's apologizing. And a lot of people struggle with apologizing, admitting that they're wrong, right? And saying they're sorry in a way that's actually sincere and meaningful and vulnerable, right? Because it is vulnerable. It means, you're admitting that you made a mistake, and that in some ways it shouldn't. Like, we all make mistakes. We're human, right? And yet, a lot of us have a really difficult time admitting we were wrong and sincerely apologizing, and not doing it in a way that tries to diminish what we did, right? I'm sorry your feelings are hurt is not really an apology, right? It's saying, I'm not sorry for the thing I did, but I'm sorry you feel that way. Well, we shouldn't be telling people how to feel or judging that, or that's not the point. The point is you did something that led them to feel that way. So what is it about the thing you did that you're sorry for? And to truly commit to yourself to becoming a better version of yourself by trying to not do the thing again, right? Those are things that require some courage, right? To embrace our own shortcomings, our own mistakes, and to own them, and to commit to being better, to our personal growth, right? To change, right? That requires a certain level of vulnerability and courage, right? And we don't know, like when we apologize, also there's some fear there, because we don't know if the person's going to accept our apology or not, right? And we've got guilt and shame that we're probably dealing with on some level, right? And so we have to have the courage to apologize and do it sincerely, and then to really commit to the growth that we won't do it again, right? So that's an important one. But the payoff, just like with being vulnerable and authentic in order to have truly authentic relationships, the payoff with this one is that apologizing sincerely and trying to make amends and trying to make sure that you don't do it again, like, that's a trust building opportunity in a relationship. You can make a deposit into the emotional bank account of that relationship by apologizing and by making amends and by trying to do better. Like, that that's an amazing opportunity to deepen the relationship, strengthen it, right? It might be weakened initially by what we did, but we can actually strengthen the relationship. It can come out stronger if we're willing to be vulnerable, admit what we did wrong, own it, and then make amends and do better. That will make an impression on the other person, right? So that's a great one, right? For having courage, and yet it's hard. A lot of people really struggle with it, and they avoid the situation, or they avoid admitting that they were wrong, or they try to, do a half-hearted or, weak apology. And that's not going to do the trick. That, in fact, can make it an additional withdrawal from the emotional bank account of that relationship, because the person might be more upset, more resentful, more hurt, feel more rejected and abandoned by you in that moment. And so it can really, not apologizing and owning it and trying to do better in the future, that will, expand the damage that was done by the initial thing you said or did, right? Or didn't do, right? If it was something that you neglected to do or a commitment you didn't own up to. So that's a big one, right? I think, and a lot of us need some help and practice on apologizing well. And then another area where we need to have the courage to be vulnerable, and it's similar to apologizing, is asking for help. Right? It's similar to that, I think, to what happens when we need to apologize. That we're admitting that we're not perfect and that we need help in some way. But we all do. Like, there are all these things and situations where we need help and support from other people, and things are often much better and more enjoyable and more successful when we do them collaboratively with other people. And asking people for help is a great, kind of nod to them and their expertise or their wisdom, and so it's a great example of trust, right? So it's a deposit in the emotional bank account for that relationship to ask somebody for help, and yet a lot of us struggle with that because we were brought up to think that we have to have all the answers ourselves, and you pull yourself up by your bootstrap. That was certainly the way I was brought up, and so when I was younger, it was hard for me to ask for help. Still is at times, without a doubt, right? To ask people for help. And so I have to work on it. It has to be a conscious practice. And it requires some courage, right? Because it's showing vulnerability. I don't know what to do. I need help. I can't do this by myself, right? In our society, that has been programmed into many of us, particularly men, but a lot of women too, that asking for help is a sign of weakness. And so that makes us afraid that we're going to be judged or rejected or abandoned even because we're seen as weak. And yet, it takes real strength and courage to ask for help because of that. So if you want to appear strong and confident, actually asking for help is the way to do it. People like that, right? It's like, wow, they have humility. They feel strong enough in their ego that they can ask for help, right? It's the insecure person who lacks the courage to ask for help. So if you can build up your courage, it's actually a way to build your self-esteem. It becomes kind of mutually reinforcing. It's easier to ask for help and have the courage to ask for help if you have strong self-esteem. But having the courage to ask for help can also increase your self-esteem, right? It can make you feel more competent because you're going to get more help. You're going to feel like you're being set up for success. You're going to get better results, right? You have stronger and deeper relationships with those people. Like, it just reinforces it all. So that's a big one, right? And then, I think, and this kind of goes back. I didn't talk about this earlier, but I was just thinking it. One of the ways in which we have to have courage, and this happens throughout our lives, and it relates to, kind of the vulnerability in relationships, but also especially change. And that's when we have to face serious illness or death, right? Either of someone else that we care about or our own eventual mortality. And it requires courage to face those things, right? To face illness, to face death, loss, grief. as well as the inevitability of our own. But having the courage to do that can also be very empowering because it allows us to, again, be vulnerable with other people and ask for help and support and love, and that can deepen those experiences, right, and those relationships. And if we learn how to grieve in a healthy way, then it can deepen our appreciation for that relationship with the person who is no longer with us. It can, deepen our appreciation for other people in our lives who are still with us, right, and make us maybe more mindful and present, right? By having the courage to feel what we're feeling in those moments, to fear, and to face it with courage, allows us to, I think, in some ways, be more mindful, more present, and to deepen the experiences, the gratitude and appreciation for what we do have in life and for this journey as long as we have it, right? That's what it gives us, that courage to face that kind of fear, right? It gives us a deeper ability to enjoy, appreciate, get the most out of every moment that we do have with the people in our lives for as long as we have them, and the experiences in our lives for as long as we have the ability to be on this journey. So I think that's a big one, and it's hard, right? Those are big ones, right? Facing serious illness, facing, your own mortality, or dealing with the grief and loss of someone else. But by having the courage to do so and to feel the fear and feel the grief, to have the courage to get through them and to ask others for help and support and love along the way, like that deepens our experience as a human being. And that's a big one. And in all these different ways, and I'm sure we could come up with more ways in which we need to have courage in our lives, but in all these ways that we need to have courage, one of the ways that we can foster more courage in ourselves is by visualizing. One of the great things about the brain is that it really doesn't know the difference between visualizing and reality. So if we can really imagine situations in which we need to have more courage, and imagine ourselves handling those situations with the courage that we need, we are more likely to handle those kinds of situations in the future with courage. So visualizing is really important, whether you do it through meditation or just, sitting down in a quiet moment and visualizing the situation that you might have some fear or trepidation about, and imagining it playing out and doing so in a way that you feel good about, that you feel that you're being courageous, being authentic, being vulnerable, going through your fear rather than trying to suppress it or avoid it. Right? That will really help you do better in the future. So visualization is a powerful tool in trying to help us do better in the future, particularly around things that require some courage. Similarly, I think reminding ourselves, whether it's through journaling or just more positive self-talk, rather than putting ourselves down and reminding us of all the times that we lacked courage, reminding ourselves of the times that we did have courage and showed grit and resilience and strength, that we were, people of integrity, right? That we handled moral dilemmas well. Like that's important to be constantly reminding ourselves that we can do hard things and we can be courageous. That also will bolster our confidence to handle situations better in the future, and to remind ourselves that we are courageous and we have this within us, and we can muster it again, right? We can generate that courage again. So that's important as well. And coming back to something I talked about at the beginning of this episode, we need to be mindful as parents and teachers and grandparents and aunts and uncles, and like how we help our kids learn to be courageous, right? And that means being a lot more thoughtful and intentional about the ways in which we encourage kids to take risks and to go into their discomfort zone, and to be bored and to meet new people and try new things, and that when there are consequences, don't be so quick to jump in and try and save your kid from consequences. Let them face consequences, more often, and help them process them and help them develop the courage to deal with the consequences and to learn the lessons from the consequences so they can make better decisions and better mistakes tomorrow. That way they can understand that failure isn't something to be avoided at all costs. It's something that is a part of life, and it's a part of learning, and that you can learn from failure and struggle. Right? That's huge. Like, a lot of our big lessons are from failing. Right? In any attempt to solve a problem or invent something, right, to be innovative, requires failure repeatedly and learning from the failures. Right? We need to have resilience and grit to deal with the problems that we face in our lives and that our society is facing. And kids aren't going to develop the grit and the resilience and the understanding that we need to embrace failure, right? The Adam Grant thing, I want to be failing regularly, right? At least once big time a year or 10% a year. Because that mindset, that courage is necessary for us to have the opportunity to grow and to achieve things and to become better and stronger and deal with life's ups and downs throughout our lives. And so we need to make sure that we're doing that. It doesn't mean that, you're going to let your kids do anything they want to all the time and let them be in life-threatening situations all the time. No, but it means that we really need to be a lot less, designing and curating and controlling their lives and protecting them all the time, and rather, give them some more freedom to exercise choice and to be uncomfortable and to problem solve and, deal with conflicts. And, we can be there to empathize and make sure they feel loved unconditionally and help them learn lessons and all that. But we need to let them take some more chances and deal with more consequences than we often do, I think. So, food for thought, right? Thanks for listening. I hope this was thought-provoking and made you think a little bit about your own life, and hopefully, a deeper appreciation of the many ways in which you have courage, right? I think that's one of the things we need to be reminded of too, is that, a lot of times we face difficult situations and change and loss and we're afraid and we're like, oh my God, I can't do this. And yet we need reminders that we can do hard things. We've done them in the past. We've had courage in the past, right? At times that maybe you don't give yourself full appreciation and credit for. And so it's important to think about these different situations and different ways in which we need to have courage. Because in part, we need to remind ourselves, yeah, I've had courage in the past, repeatedly. And I can do that again. I can muster the courage again now and in the future. I can do difficult things that make me afraid and uncomfortable. And I can deal with the big ups and downs and handle them with integrity, right? And authenticity. And so I think that's important. And I think particularly, I hope the stuff about our relationships and being vulnerable and authentic and apologizing, I think those are asking for help. I think those are really important things that sometimes we get programmed to do the opposite. And we need to fight that programming and lean into it and be courageous. To be our best version of our authentic selves and to be vulnerable and to ask for help and ask for forgiveness, right? So I think that's important. And I hope that you think about that and the ways in which you are a courageous person and that you can maybe muster even more courage moving forward, right? Thank you. Keep an eye out. In the next couple of days, we'll release the bonus episode with Erica talking about her experience with courage, particularly this past year. I think it's really powerful and inspirational and thoughtful. I think you'll really enjoy that. And if you're not following us, the podcast, please do. And again, leave a rating and review. And please follow on social media as well, at Integrity and Joy. On Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and if you're interested in one-to-one coaching, if any of this resonates with you and you'd like to explore either one-to-one coaching or joining an integrity circle, a mastermind, a small group of people who support each other's personal and professional growth and cheer each other on and help each other out and bolster each other's courage, and it's really a wonderful thing. So if you're interested in either of those and exploring how they could make a big difference in your life, go to integrityandjoy.com or send us a message wherever you got this podcast or through social media. Thanks again for joining. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to talking with you next time. Thanks for listening. If today's episode resonated with you, imagine what we could accomplish together in a one-to-one coaching session. Visit integrityandjoy.com to learn more and book your free consultation. Let's create the life you've been striving for.